It's on you, brother.
All right. I want to thank you all for joining us for another episode of Let Your Words Count. You all can see the logo down here. We're getting official, getting our merch and everything together, and the logo's up in front of us here. So you all know normally it's myself, Gary Gann, and Ethan Merriweather, and today we have two distinguished guests with us today.
Watch out.
All right. So we have Brother James Cole here with us, and we have Ethan's older brother Paul Merriweather, joining us today too. So we wanted to have them come in. Also, some very thoughtful brothers, just add to the conversation and give some more depth and clarity to our topics. So this is Martin Luther King's birthday this Monday, and a good word that kind of plays into his dream, and the carrying out of that dream is the word inconsiderate, and that's going to be our word for today. We've kind of had some preliminary discussions. We like to kind of mostly come off the top of the head. Got a little kind of, guide we've kind of printed out to have some initial discussions from. But again, this is mostly off the top of our head and just kind of having a dynamic discussion with one another. So with the word inconsiderate, I'll start off with the definition, and then we'll open up the floor to whoever has thoughts they want to add, experiences, or insight to the word inconsiderate. The definition we're looking at today is inconsiderate refers to acting without regard for the feelings, needs, or rights of others. Acting without regard to the feelings, needs, or rights of others, and it involves being thoughtless, selfish, or careless in one's actions or words. Okay, being thoughtless, selfish, or careless in one's actions or words. So does anybody have any thoughts or anything you want to add to our discussion on inconsiderate today?
Well, one of the things I do want to talk about is the kind of like the history and the origins of the word as well. Mm-hmm. It's one of the things that we typically like to talk about and consider. The word inconsiderate comes from a prefix in, like we always talk about, mm-hmm. even the last episode, mm-hmm. Which meaning is not. Mm-hmm. And the Latin is considerare, meaning to think about or to ponder on, to mm-hmm. consider, thought process. Mm-hmm. It conveys a lack of consideration or care. And one of the things that we want to talk about is, like, what does inconsiderate look like mm-hmm. in the eyes of us or whatnot? And do we know when we are being inconsiderate? Like, it's one of those things that I think about all the time by saying, like, do you choose to be inconsiderate, or right. is that something that typically happens unknowingly, or right. whatever the case may be? You right. know what I'm saying? Without a thought, you're being inconsiderate. You don't know that you're being inconsiderate until somebody tells you mm-hmm. that you're being inconsiderate. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I was thinking about as well.
Mm-hmm. And just taking up with what you said, to not consider, okay? And when I looked into it a little bit more, one of the side definitions, if you will, was to say to not properly consider, mm-hmm. okay? So I gave that a whole lot of thought, and I have some thoughts to go along with that, but I think we're still early on in this, so mm-hmm. I think we're going to just stay with the way the word has been presented. So it says inconsiderate, meaning to not consider, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. So, because see, the thing I find about words and how interesting they are is sometimes the way the word is used automatically forms the perception. That's not the word I'm looking for. The way it's, so in other words, to say inconsiderate, the assumption is that if you were to do the opposite, mm-hmm. meaning to consider, then the outcome would have been different.
I love it.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So given that, and as Gary said, concerning today being the actual celebration of Martin Luther King Day, if we were to use that word, we would say that not only in the past, but even presently, there are those that are not considering the rights, the opinions, the concerns of others, and then Absolutely. Therefore they're acting in such a way for which the one on the negative side of that word feels like they are not being considered.
Absolutely.
Their rights, their feelings, their emotions. So to me, to a certain extent, the word inconsiderate automatically means that to be considerate the cause is just. Okay, so what do you guys think about that?
Interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Go ahead, G.
No, go ahead. I think Paul was going to say
Yeah,
something.
go ahead.
No.
No, I was just thinking about that's true. When you have to take a step back and really think about like your actions all the time. Like we always have to think about our actions, and do we consider how our actions, affect someone else's feelings? That goes on. That's actually mentioned in the definition. And are we aware? Are we self-aware of those actions and what those impacts can be? You know what I mean? When I think about inconsiderate, we work at a place. I work in corporate offices and stuff, and so when you consider being at a place where there's thousands of people, ethnicities, backgrounds, cultures. Sometimes you do things and say things that you don't realize that you're actually being inconsiderate in some type of way, towards someone's feelings,
Right.
a culture, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
And then you say to yourself, like, man, you go home and you ponder on it, and you just like, man, I didn't even really realize that I actually touched on a point that really offended somebody. Because that's the thing about with being inconsiderate, going to your point, is about the offense that comes. You know what I'm saying? Are you offending somebody? Some people, like, that's what they do. I remember, Paul, you was talking about you have a coworker, we ain't going to mention any names, that is actually inconsiderate with the way he does things at the job, right?
Yes.
You
Very
know?
much so. And it really affects us. It affects us everything in the plant, the chemistry, the shift that we're on, the second shift we come in, we have to do his things, and there's no accountability. He's considerate. So I took to myself to say, you know what, it doesn't matter. Nothing will happen. We just do what we do. And that's how I learned to work with it. Yet, he still fits under being inconsiderate. And we speak of inconsiderate like on the freeway. Say, for instance, there's an accident, and you know the police want you to get over. You're going to have to start merging over. And yet all these cars try to cut in that lane, being very inconsiderate. I'm like, if we all did things right, we all could move. 2-3 minutes wouldn't matter. We all can get on the same spot at the same time. We can let this go through. But no, we got people who just get selfish. And I love a truck will come and block off that lane so people won't try it. It's just things every day we see. Go in the post office just to pick up mail or do something. There's a guy up there trying to talk to the attendant. I'm like, there's people in line. You know what I mean? What are you doing?
Crazy.
Trying to have a conversation. Things like just basic things like that. We don't realize how inconsiderate, because we have to go on with our lives, everyday lives. We have things to do, places to be, and just things like that just come. Just when the pastor said, "Hey, it is what it is."
Yeah.
Consider we don't realize the things we do, and
That's so true.
yeah.
Interesting. And I think that, is another word that it kind of had in the template here for us is the word empathy. And I think that's a good counterpoint to inconsiderate. It's like if you put yourself in the position of the person on the receiving end of inconsiderate behavior, you wouldn't act that way, right? If you were in that position, you would want to be treated differently. And this is where, to me, the glaring error and the blame and the negative emotions that this word brings up, this is where it comes from. If this was happening to you, you would act differently.
Yes.
But because you're not the one on the receiving end, because you're not the one that's being put in this position of being at the mercy of somebody else, you're only acting in regard to your own benefit, your own feelings, and not considering what's happening to the other person. So that lack of empathy, that refusing to put yourself in the position of that person to think about how your actions, your words are going to affect that person, can't help but go to the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I think about that, and I kind of like a little bit of a different, like, as you do unto others, you are doing to yourself. Maybe you don't realize it right now, but the things you're doing to other people that are connected, that are your brothers and sisters, that are of the same family, I believe those things have a negative impact on the person giving the inconsiderate actions or behaviors, whether or not they admit it. And this is why I also love that, and I'm forgetting the exact place of it, but one of the places in the scriptures where it defines love it talks about it from the standpoint of there's this chain reaction. You might do something bad to this one person or inconsiderate to this person, but then there's going to be some cleanup effort because that person is going to need help or healing after that. So now you not only hurt this one person, but now you're impacting the lives of somebody else that has to come in behind you and clean up after this person. Clean up the residue, the fallout over what you've done to this person. They're now hurting. They're now in this position from you having not considered what was going on with them, and now they need help or services from other people. So you've multiplied your impact to not just the person that's on the receiving end, but other people that are going to be coming behind to have to clean up after you.
That's very important, and that's why letting your words count is so powerful, because it does affect others.
Absolutely.
Words are spirit, as we understand.
That's right.
As you were talking, my wife was shared with me something that she dealt with over the holiday period. You know, we just came out of the Christmas period, and she was at one of the department stores, and while they were standing in line, one of the people that was standing in line decided to share with everyone within earshot their particular political persuasion and their thoughts on certain things, right? Now, no one would begrudge that person of their right to have their own opinion, okay, whether you agree with them or disagree with them. It's their right. But this person did not consider others as to whether or not they even wanted to hear what this person had to say. And so, to your point, this person didn't consider what effect their words would have on others, and in particular, if there would have been a response that person would not have welcomed. Okay? And so even if no one else did anything, they just sat there and endured it. Think about the thoughts that they have in their own mind. Okay, and even if those thoughts are of retribution, and even if you decided, well, you know, we're in a mall or a department store, cameras everywhere, if I respond physically, therefore it's on camera, and then now I have legal issues to deal with, but yet the thought is now in your mind.
That's right.
And so then now you're combating in your own mind these things that are coming based on someone's inconsiderate use of words.
Wow.
So words are powerful.
It really is. It really is. And I think about, you know, a lot of times I think about, like, what am I becoming in the process, right, of all this? Like you said, that we don't I don't want to say that, that's too general, but do we consider the peripherals, like you were saying, the peripherals, the surrounding elements that are being impacted in your actions or whatnot? And I want to go back to kind of what Paul was talking about a truck driver that has to actually intervene and blockade. You see it all the time where like a truck driver will come in and say, you know, you being rude, I'm gonna block you off, which you got to have that. There is a support that comes to wake other people up to say, do you know, you realize what you're doing right now? Sometimes it takes a person that's outside of the component that is being what's the word I want to affected
from the outside of the situation.
Somebody outside of the situation has to step in and say, hey man, wake up. You know, do you know what you just did? Now I have to admit, I don't do that enough. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring up this topic and talk about it, because I realize in my life that there are a lot of words that I should know better as a older gentleman, that I should apply it more often. You see what I'm saying?
Or accurately. Or even accurately, because that's one of the thoughts I have with that as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine. No.
You know,
you good.
Applying the word accurately.
Absolutely.
And see, because, and that's why words fascinate me so much, because they, of course, are mental pictures, if you will. And they also are based on your experiences. So if someone else has a different experience than yours, you could be using the same word, but the understanding varies.
Absolutely.
Okay, and so then now there's crosstalk going on. And there's really not communication, even though you're speaking the same language, whether it's English, Spanish, French, whatever the case may be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? So I was also thinking about in the emotional impact that we were just talking about, and just sitting there and just resting on the fact and on the basis that where do I go from here? Like you were saying earlier, Gary, about you don't know that action is causing a lot of other people to either step in or have to handle the fallout.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? The fallout of an action.
Absolutely.
And the thing is, a person that's inconsiderate, like you said, is, and we could talk about this a little bit further, is about the selfishness that's
Yes.
a part of inconsiderate.
Right.
Like it's all self-serving.
Right.
Like you said. And I want to talk about that a little bit more, because I really believe that inconsideration can actually take you toward many, many other words that people don't consider that would develop in the confines of of the action that you've just done. You know, selfishness, pride, ego. It just go down the
Absolutely.
line.
Absolutely.
Like, once again, the reason for let your words count is here is not that we're linguists, as you know. I am not a expert in English, in a linguist or anything like that. It's just these words are words that I can apply to my life so I can learn to get better, being a better human. You know what I'm saying? A creature of God. You know what I'm saying? So when I hear about someone telling me, Ethan, you being inconsiderate right now, that affects you. You know what I'm saying? And if it doesn't affect you, that means, what are you doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, if a person, that's almost like, I'm just using another word, immature. If someone calls you an immature, sometimes that's worse than a slap. You know what I'm saying? At least a slap stings for a moment, but you know what I'm saying? It goes away after a while. But if you're being called immature or something outside your name or whatnot, or something that you assume that you did not do or you are doing, that does something to you. Right. You know what I mean?
So the brother said, words are spirit, and your body can heal quickly. Your spirit, not so much, right? You get something that hurts your spirit, there are long-lasting implications. It's not it's cut, it's bleeding, I stopped the bleeding, and after in a couple of weeks, it's gone. If your spirit gets hurt, seriously hurt from a word, that takes some time to heal from, especially when it cuts deep, when it hits you. Last week's word, insecurity, right? If it hits you in something that you're insecure on or not aware of, you know what I mean? And then somebody tells you something and that word settles in your spirit, like, man, this person said I'm not considerate and I thought I was. Yeah. That's going to be in your mind for a while.
Right.
Yeah,
that's something else.
I believe we've all been in situations in which we maybe weren't being considerate. It probably wasn't like blatantly and obvious and outright, but you go back and realize, like I told you earlier about the girl in the gym who was stuck on a machine, and I really didn't know, was she acting? She had her crew around her. Did she want me to come and help her? And I felt bad about it, like later on, but you just don't know. Do I just go run up on a young lady? So things like that, the things you see, and then but maybe Spirit is telling me, hey, you at least you realize what you had done, you saw it, and you realize you feel bad about it. And you mentioned that I should probably want to go say something. Don't say anything. I just didn't never say anything at all, but things like that. And it's just I guess we have to be more careful. We have to be more mindful of our surroundings at times, man. Like, I'm not the kind of person, like, when I go shopping, I see people cut in line. Oh, y'all love this one. We go into the Secretary of State.
Right.
Long line. Y'all know it
always.
Was it down on 4th Street when you live on the west side? That's right. So it's this old lady. They will call your name, and you have to sit down. This old lady decided to get up and just get in front of everybody, just pass everybody. Little lady, gentleman. I was a young man. This gentleman probably was in his 40s, 50s. He said, "She's old. Let her go." He said, "She's old. Just let her. She's elder. She's your elderly. Let her go." And I'm like, wait a minute, that's not right. she should be she should be the leader. Right. She should be the example. She is the elder.
Interesting.
And I didn't say nothing. I was young, but other people were appalled. And the lady got away with it. Just things like that. But I don't know. Maybe she was in a hurry. Maybe she had to be somewhere. I don't know.
Right.
We do let things go. I think as men, sometimes we do have to stand down, It's not right, but,
That's what I like, too, about what Ethan said earlier. Asking yourself the question, am I considerate often enough? And I think that the answer to that question is one of those. It's kind of one of those self-incriminating things. None of us are considerate often enough, right? I think that anything short of being considerate of how your words and actions affect people all the time, there's room for improvement. There's never a time when you should be acting or saying something and not thinking about what's the outcome, what's the fallout, the follow-up of my words and actions going to be. When you lose that, I think you've started to lose the battle. So I think that the goal, the journey that we're all on, is all trying to get to that point of being considerate all the time.
Nice.
And when you're not doing that, stop, pause. And again, sometimes some things are going to be just innocuous. Some things you can do, and maybe there's no impact. You're doing something in the privacy in your own home. Maybe it doesn't affect anybody else whatsoever. But, you know, when there is the possibility of your actions and words affecting somebody else, you have to be thinking about, okay, if I was in that position, what I appreciate, what I want, what I'm doing to be done to me. Yeah. And if you're honest about that, that should always be driving human behavior in a better spot, you know. And I think about I think about a lot, right? Maybe controversial. This is just in my head. I'm not saying this is the truth, but I think about a lot when Jesus interacted with people in the scripture. There is very few examples, and it's usually because it was deserving, which is another aspect of this inconsiderate thing. Very few examples where people left his presence and those people weren't, very few times people interacted with Jesus and left that interaction without an overwhelming feeling of, wow, God really loves me. The people he healed, the people he ministered to, everybody left his presence. And I think it's evident in the way that they responded that their feeling was, God really does love me and care for me. And I look at and I think about for myself, how many times did I interact with somebody in my position that people left feeling like God hated them?
Interesting.
And is that right? Right? That consideration of, we've had this conversation many times, we like to think about and define love and not take it any farther than, I feel like I love this person, or I'm doing what I've been told is an act of love, and not considering what is that person that received it felt like. To me, a qualifier is, if I'm saying I'm doing something in love, I want to then be able to go back to that person on the receiving end and say, now, did that feel like love to you?
Right.
And if it didn't, we're missing something, right? We're missing something. So that consideration, putting yourself in that person's shoes, what I want, what I'm saying, and what I'm doing to be done or said to me, this profit over people kind of thing, I hate that. Capitalism is fine, but when it gets to a point where I can get so rich that I'm going to start to disregard people that are at a lower class, lower status, lower income to me, and I can do it and get away with it because I'm making so much money in this, I can enrich the other people that would be the ones who should stop me or put some kind of regulations in place. That's a problem. So we get too caught up in thinking about, you know, self-care is something that's necessary, but it has to get to a point where you consider self-care needs to be revisited or readdressed if that self-care means somebody else is hurting as a result of it, right?
You know, that leads right into one of the thoughts that I had, and it's concerning the scripture, as you mentioned Jesus, and we made comments about the Word of God earlier, more so having to do with, we know that there's a passage that says, where Paul said that we should esteem other better than ourselves.
Absolutely.
Or higher, okay?
Absolutely.
And so, of course, we understand that does not mean that you lower yourself.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
But going to the point that we're discussing with regard to inconsideration, do we consider the others as we do what we do, as we say the things that we say, okay? And it doesn't mean that we necessarily yield what is right, okay? But then there are other instances where Paul said sometimes that we should take wrong.
Yes.
But the basis of it is to keep peace.
Yes.
Okay? And so being inconsiderate, oftentimes what's happening is peace goes away. Because we're creating a situation where somebody wins and somebody loses.
Absolutely.
Somebody's happy and someone else is
right.
not happy,
That's
furious. But if we consider what we say, so then now it means, am I thinking about and evaluating before words come out of my mouth? You know, because we also know that the scripture says that we're going to give an account for every idle word, right? And some people think that's very onerous, but it's not. It's showing care and concern for someone else. Because if I say or do something to please myself, And if my actions cause someone else to start, my point earlier about the person standing in line at the store, start entertaining negative thoughts, that's on me. But you might say, well, no, it's not on you, it's on them. But yet I've just created a situation now. They have to fight with these thoughts that could result in lack of peace. And so then if we consider that peace is paramount amongst mankind as we interact with one another, when we think about it that way, then we're more careful with what we say and how we say it. Well, sometimes the timing has to change. So if you know that this is the right thing to do, maybe you're going to do it, but maybe not at this particular time, because it could be misconstrued and it can cause error to arise, even though your actions are just. So going back to the word inconsideration, to me, it also has to do with perspective also.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
And I have a thought on that, but I don't know if we've exhausted the use of the word. But I have a thought on...
No, go ahead.
Okay, perspective. Okay. Because as we've been talking about this word inconsideration, or not properly considering something, okay? So when that use of that term, not properly considering, like I said earlier, it paints a picture that, well, if you had properly considered, then you would have made a different choice.
Sure.
Okay. I recall my daughter, she was about 13 years old. Okay. I don't know if she's ever going to see this podcast, but you know, oh well. I'm even tell her that it's on, so she'll remember. Okay. She was about 13 years old. She came to my wife and I, and she wanted to go to a house party with one of her friends. Okay, so, 13, 14, 15-year-olds, right?
Wow.
And so, of course, we as parents, we asked, of course, well, who are these people? Because we didn't know the parents, right? So then once we recognized we didn't know the parents, so now we don't know the surrounding or anything like that. And so, of course, in our mind, it's automatically going to be, this isn't going to happen, right? So in her pleading her case, she states, well, the parents aren't going to be there, but there is going to be an adult there. And we say, okay. She says, well, my friend has an 18-year-old brother. See, Brother Gary shaking his head already, right? Now, consider this. My daughter, when she was presenting this, based on her limited understanding, and even more so her willingness to want to go, she thought adult meant responsibility. Okay? So this is where perspective comes in from my standpoint. From her perspective, we were being inconsiderate. So you see, I'm using the word now.
Right.
From her perspective, we were being inconsiderate because she was telling us basically, I really want to do this.
Wow.
And that in her mind, it's safety there because there's an adult there. Okay. And of course, I didn't even know this family. I didn't know this 18-year-old, but we all know. We know, right?
Right.
So even if this person was not that way, we still have to be watchful and careful,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So we had to assume the negative because we don't understand the situation.
Absolutely.
But she didn't have that depth of knowledge, and she was going more so based on her, I want to do this, it's my friends, I really want to be part of it, right? So from her standpoint, we were being inconsiderate of her feelings.
Right.
She presented what she thought was good evidence to say she should be able to go.
Wow.
So in her eyes, her parents were inconsiderate.
Wow.
So then now the question is, were we being inconsiderate?
Right. Interesting. Wow. Wow.
That's definitely a very
deep.
good.
That's good. That's good.
Right.
That's good to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
So was I inconsiderate or not?
No.
No.
no. That's where it comes to the perspective again, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, see, the challenge is, how do you not correct her behavior? I don't want to say that, but how do you develop a case so she can understand the words and the understanding that's coming out of her mouth?
I got you. And please remember your thought, but going back to the definition as I read it, if I was being inconsiderate, I was not properly considering her viewpoint.
Yeah, perfect. So but my question goes down to what you just said right there. So once you recognized her, in her mind, being inconsiderate, and she doesn't realize she's being inconsiderate, right? because she's being
It's a vicious circle, isn't it?
It's a bit, yeah, exactly. So she's being inconsiderate. She's being inconsiderate, not considering your care for her and that situation. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So now, that's where immaturity comes in. You see what I'm saying? And that's where me and G was just talking about this, about how big inconsiderate is. Inconsiderate, when you think about inconsiderate, it does, the foundations of inconsideration is immaturity. If you're being immature, causes you not to fully think about the points and counterpoints.
For sure.
Yep. That's wild, man.
Yeah,
That's just wild. So when you talk about, because don't worry, my daughter does the same thing. My daughter does. You're being fair. You're being unfair. You're being unfair. You know. But once again, the points of knowledge and different things like that is very important with wisdom. I think knowledge alone is dangerous. Me personally, that's just me, right? I think knowledge should be backed up with understanding and wisdom.
Absolutely.
All right. So when you talk about when you're being inconsiderate, knowledge, understanding, and wisdom are in a balance. You know what I'm saying? Because like you said, man, when you are at your job, people are really just thinking about themselves. Inconsiderate is really self-serving, being inconsiderate. You don't fully think about, you know, the end result of your actions affecting others, just like what we were saying earlier. And I think that is a huge topic when you talk about the perspective.
I got something else though.
Yeah.
Going to the scripture. I forget which prophet it was. I don't know if it was Jeremiah, Ezekiel, or one of the others. But God told him, said, set your face like a flint. Meaning, say what I say. When you see their eyes, when you see their faces based on what they're hearing, he says, don't allow yourself to be affected by them.
Right.
They're not going to like what you're saying,
Right.
but say it anyway.
Right.
So then was the prophet and then therefore God being inconsiderate because he knew
Great
that
question.
it was not to their liking.
Very good.
And I think the parallel with that verse you just mentioned and with your story is there's the degrees, right? I'm considering your safety above your entertainment and your fun.
Nice.
Right? So am I inconsiderate of your fun? Less so, right? It's not that I'm totally inconsiderate of it, but it's less of a concern to me than your safety, your well-being.
Exactly.
So if that's your priority, then you're being considerate of what's more important. To the person that's not thinking about this is going to be a risk to my safety, I just want to go have fun, they're going to look at it as inconsiderate because they don't have your perspective of a parent and wanting your child to be safe, right? So without that level of maturity, then they might miss where the consideration lies and think it's inconsiderate just because you're not thinking about it from their same viewpoint.
So then therefore, given that, the person who is not considering the whole picture, not realizing that safety is foremost reason why they're not able to do what they're doing, for them, they could feel justified
Absolutely.
in their view of you being wrong.
Absolutely.
And that's why we have to be very careful
And be very honest.
and also recognize that when we do right, when we say right, it's not always going to be received.
It's true.
And we would be perceived as being wrong, or in this case, inconsiderate, when
Great
in
point.
reality, we are being more than considerate.
Great point.
And I shouldn't say more than considerate. We're definitely being considerate.
For sure.
Because the end goal is goodness or safety, if you will.
Love it. I love it. All right.
Yeah.
You got the closing points?
Yeah,
We try to keep it
trying to keep it
under
a good time.
limit. Yeah.
Not really. I think that we
Great
covered
discussion.
a lot. It's very. I think we can take it. I'm sure we're going to revisit this
For sure.
because this word it branches off to so many different topics and discussions. You know, but one of the things that we want to share is like the key points that we want to consider while we get off of line or get off of streaming is we have to learn to recognize it once we know that it's present and it exists, right? inconsideration is a word that we don't realize that we're doing. You know what I mean? We don't realize we're there. I mean, we could have ate a bowl of chili. Cause a whole.
And I consider you gonna be in a closed-in car in an hour. Right.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
you can really cause some issues, right? You know what I mean? But just being, let's instead of being inconsiderate, let's be more considerate of others.
Empathy.
Like you said.
Empathy.
Let's
Yep.
empathize with others, have more compassion
Absolutely.
for one another, and recognize the need. You have to recognize the need and recognize, even if someone else think that we're being inconsiderate and our intentions were not to be inconsiderate,
Right.
You know what I'm saying? We weren't being inconsiderate. Let's make sure we communicate clearly what was in our heart and be
Absolutely.
honest at that point.
Absolutely.
And just like what my brother was saying, like when working out at the gym, he saw a woman that was struggling or whatnot. He didn't know, once it hits your mind, eventually it may take a couple of days where you just think about it and just like, you know what, I could do that. Maybe somebody was telling me something. That could be your opportunity to go build that relationship. Because everything is about a reconciliation of relationship, reconciling relationships, nurturing relationships. So no one can walk away not feeling one another, having any animosity or anything towards one another.
Animosity.
You know what I'm saying?
You get it.
We know what you meant.
That's another word.
We know what you meant.
That's another word
We'll
we're
add
going
that
to
for
use.
next week. Admosity. Next week's word is admosity. You go. We know what you meant, bro. We know what you meant.
You see why I need to let your words count. I love it.
Love it, bro.
Yeah, but those are the closer points. Anybody else? I don't have to.
I'm all set, bro.
Okay, that was good.
Man, good one, y'all.
All right.
All right, we're signing out.
All right. Y'all take
All right,
care.
Take care.
Like, comment, subscribe.
Thank you. That's good. But you went to another. I didn't realize that we were thinking about inconsiderate being not, like watch your fellow man.